Bastion can be one of the most frustrating characters to play against in the entire game. He's incredibly powerful in the right situation, and a good Bastion can feel oppressive. So what do you do? How do you beat him? I'm going to break it down in this video so you'll never lose to a Bastion again. Now, specifically when I talked about the right situation, Bastion is very strong in the optimal scenarios for him against certain characters and against certain playstyles. So in order to beat a Bastion, you must counterpick or change up your playstyle. And I'm going to talk about exactly how you do that. First off, let's identify Bastion's strengths and weaknesses so that we can really get to the root of what you need to do in order to beat him every single time. In the strength category, Bastion has high burst damage, and yes, this includes tanks, where anyone that is out of position or fighting him in a direct confrontation is going to take a ton of freaking damage. Bastion effectively outputs more damage per second than most characters on the roster, if not all of them, outside of like small windows of time. In addition to this, Bastion is pretty tanky with high HP relative to the rest of the DPS in his roster, which can make it so he can ignore small amounts of chip damage where other characters would have to leave. He can just stand straight up and take it and get healed up by his team. And the third strength is not necessarily directly speaking to Bastion, but how he's effectively played in a game. I call it the all hands on deck, where if you select like a diver, for instance, getting people to coordinate with you and sync up with you is very hard, but selecting a Bastion means you're going to get additional resources from your team just due to the nature of protect or pocket the Bastion, protect the president. You're going to automatically get more people just helping you, enabling you, healing you, defending you than you would on pretty much any other DPS. Now, even though Bastion has these strengths, he also has some pretty big weaknesses. Number one is he has a large hitbox. While he does have higher HP, it is way larger than most DPS, which means it's easier to hit and connect with abilities, which is going to be important when we talk about how to deal with him. In addition to this, he has low mobility when he commits, especially to trying to fight or commit to his turret form. He can't move around very much, which means that he's easy to deny by using natural cover and some other effective tactics that we'll talk about later on in the video. Now, when I talked about the all hands on deck strength, it also can be a weakness where this character often needs team help and is really difficult to carry by yourself without the resources of your team. So that can be a liability in the chaotic nature of ranked, where people will often leave you high and dry. And then the last weakness is kind of a weakness for a lot of characters, but especially Bastion. He's cooldown based, as in his cooldowns need to be committed at a set time, and that's where he gets his value from primarily. And if you somehow deny the value that he gets out of his cooldowns, like his turret cooldown for instance, all of a sudden you're reducing his effectiveness by a huge margin. So it's not really how do you beat Bastion, it's how do you beat his cooldowns or make them ineffective. So I've created 3 pillars, which is what you need to focus on if you're trying to pick characters or play in a way to deny Bastion or shut him down completely. Number 1 is utility. There are certain bits of powerful utility that just straight up harm Bastion really severely, and they're easy to connect with because of his low mobility and large hitbox, and we'll talk about those in a second. Number 2 is mobility. Bastion doesn't really have a great time dealing with people that can travel around him and attack from multiple angles. He's a character that really, because of that large hitbox and low mobility and the fact that he needs team help, enemies that can actually time their engagements on their terms are really hard for Bastion to deal with. So a lot of mobility characters are going to be a problem for him. And then the third one is fundamentals. And this is something that every character can do. It's not as direct to deal with Bastion, but it's a way that you can minimize his effectiveness, which is essentially going to make him a lot weaker, if maybe ineffective at all. But first off, let's talk about utility counters. And there's a lot of them here. I'm not going to list them all, but characters like Ana, because of her nade and her sleep, both abilities that are really powerful and easy to hit on a giant slow character. Roadhog's hook, for instance. A Roadhog that's playing an off angle, you hook a Bastion, which is a really easy hook, and you could pull him around a corner and just kill him very easily. D.Va can neutralize Bastion very well with defense matrix, and generally doesn't care about Bastion because she can always leave his effective range and only engage him when it's actually an advantage for her to do so. And other abilities are also super strong against Bastion. Things like Discord from range, big hitbox with extra damage means it's really easy to poke him out. Maywall, raising a Bastion up and pushing him high so that people can just poke him out and shoot him, or even just blocking him off and exchanging your abilities for turret. And even characters like Junker Queen with abilities like Jagged Blade that can pull a Bastion out of position and force the Bastion into a retreation mode, where then you could then engage under the Bastion and you're not afraid anymore because he doesn't have turret anymore. Now, the other type of characters are mobility characters. Characters that can swarm the Bastion, attack from multiple angles, and really kind of punish this Bastion for being large, slow, and, you know, something that really needs to set up his perfect engagements to get any value. And I would include a lot of characters in this category. Characters like Tracer, Genji, Echo, Reaper, Sombra. A Tracer could easily kind of poke this Bastion from behind, and if the Bastion ever turns around onto you, you just leave his line of sight. You're just really antagonizing this Bastion and making him really, really hard to set up. You can even pulse bomb him if he ever commits to a turret really easily. Genji can really just fight a Bastion straight up, making him play into your deflect even. Echo can easily outrange a Bastion and just set up flanks with beams and her mines, and honestly, it's not really that hard for you to just avoid the Bastion entirely unless he's in a bad situation. Reaper can just kind of flank him and just 2-tap him, 3-tap him, and Sombra can just always just set up to deny a Bastion's play, whether it's with EMP or hack. And these are not all the divers, these are just some of the divers that get to really abuse Bastion a lot. Now, these are some of the characters, not all of them, but some of them that I would suggest to swap to if you're really having some trouble with Bastion. Your team's dying to Bastion a lot, and you feel like you need to bring the matters into your own hands. Picking a character that has game against the Bastion directly and shutting him down is a great way to do so. And there's a lot of characters that do so, so it doesn't really matter what role you're playing. You can definitely play something that has good game against a Bastion. But even outside of that, there's another way to counter Bastion, regardless of the character you're playing, and that's with the Fundamentals section. And mainly this is based on playing around natural cover and the exchange of cooldowns. Think about it this way. If you are in the open and you're 2, 3, 4 steps away from cover and a Bastion peeks the corner and pops his turret, you're gonna die. You're just gonna straight up die. But if you're a second from cover, or even half a second from cover, he commits the turret, and then you de-peek him, denying his damage and denying his cooldown. And then when he doesn't have it, you get to go and re-challenge that space, re-challenge that Bastion, because without his cooldown, without his turret form, he's just a fat Soldier 76, if that, with less mobility. He's super easy to shoot, and he's not as scary as any other DPS on the roster, but when he has that turret, that's when you can get punished. So playing around natural cover is really, really important, because you can neutralize one of his cooldowns. And it's also important to know where the Bastion is, so that you're never in a situation where you're standing in the open, and this guy just pops his turret and just deletes you because you don't have cover to run behind. And this is kind of a fundamental for every character, but you're more punished against a Bastion for bad fundamentals than a whole bunch of characters on the roster, maybe just any character on the roster. And that's why a lot of people are having so much trouble against Bastion, because while another character, another person would maybe shoot you once or twice and whiff a little bit, or maybe not kill you right away, and you have 3, 4 seconds to get to cover, Bastion will delete you if you're not playing proper fundamentals. And when I talked about the change or exchange of resources, realize that sometimes it's just your job to just bait out these abilities or be ready for him to use them. Once he does, then you're pulling out, pulling back, giving space or denying, and then you're back into the fight, and you're basing your engagements based off this cooldown that you're afraid of. And this is almost similar to how you would play around an ultimate at times. There are ultimates that you do this around, when someone pops an ultimate and you're just like, all right, we're gonna back off, we're not gonna play in the effective range of this ultimate, and then when the ultimate's done, we can go retake space. Bastion can feel a lot like that, where the proper play, if you can't directly confront his cooldowns and just kill him outright, is to pull back and deny it via time, exchange your time for his ability and your space for his ability, but then re-challenge when he doesn't have it. But I want to make this last point that's super, super important for you to understand, and it's straight up, if you don't have game against a Bastion, it's either play to live or play to swap. And this is super important. Do not try to directly challenge a Bastion if you don't have any means to actually shut that Bastion down. And I see this all the time in coaching sessions, where there's a Bastion that's rolling your team, dominating, and I see a Winston main jump directly onto the Bastion, bubble him off, and try to take all of his pressure on, right? They're like, oh, this guy's gonna kill my team if I don't do something. I'm gonna do something. but then you just die, you get deleted. And I've seen this with Zarya's trying to W key a Bastion. I've seen this with a number of different people that are trying to fight the Bastion directly because they feel like if they're not dealing with the Bastion, they lose, right? And this is possible on some characters like we talked about, but it's not possible in every character, and it's not possible in every situation. And it's really, really important that just as much as you respect the Bastion, you don't play into what the Bastion wants you to do just because you're afraid of your teammates dying. If they die, that's okay. Don't allow that to let you keep making the wrong play, because if you just feed trying to deny this Bastion, then your teammates are going to start feeding because the enemy team is not kept in check outside of the Bastion, and you're just going to lose to the other characters on the team because you're feeding over and over again, trying to deal with this Bastion because you have it in your mind that it's either deal with the Bastion at all costs or we lose the game, which that couldn't be further from the truth. So it's really, really important that you understand this concept, and it's really important that you realize what you can do about the situation, what can your character do, and how do you play to deny, play to live, or maybe play to kill only if the opportunity presents itself. Anyways, these are the tips that I have for you if you want to never lose to Bastion again, and I promise you, if you adopt every single one of these, Bastion's going to be a cakewalk. But if I helped you at all, please smash that like, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.